A little light comes on. There it is. Anything you say officially becomes a part of the program. All right. Let's see. What am I on? No, I'm in the wrong thing. That's the wrong class. Let me get this first one. Ta-da. All right. Let me go away. If you are following along in your Bible, you're going to need to go to Exodus chapter 12. And I will set this all up as we go here. All right. Now, I have several objectives tonight. One is just kind of continuing with your general education about, the Old Testament in general. That's kind of like my specialty. All right. Tonight, you're going to learn how to actually calculate a Sabbath, all right? That's our first objective, is how do you actually calculate what a Sabbath is? Yeah, how do you determine it? Because, you got one group stands out here, says, well, it's Saturday.
Sure, the Orthodox Jews.
Well, some of them, yeah. Then you got the Adventists, that old bunch see running around. Then you got, no, it's Sunday. It's the seventh day. Right? Who's true? What's right? Right? You're going to find out exactly who's right. All right. Now, along with that, we're going to begin to study Passover. All right? Because it's built into the Passover feast how all this stuff rolls. With the first day, with Passover and with the high Sabbath and with the Sabbath the day after that. Because it's not a Saturday or a Sunday is what you're going to find out. It's just not. In fact, the Bible says that woe to those that make the Sabbath the day of the week. Because the Sabbath...
They made the Sabbath a day of the week?
A day of the week, like Saturday or Sunday.
Okay.
What good does that do you? Right? Because that's not your Sabbath. The word Sabbath means rest. Okay, first of all. And as a Christian, your rest is with the Messiah continually. So your Sabbath is daily as a Christian. It just makes it not just a day of the week, it just makes every day of the week a Sabbath to you. All right? Now, don't let anything too crazy get involved in that. It's just a spiritual thing, all right? Because the Messiah walks with you daily. God walks with you in your walk daily, so if he's there, it's going to be a Sabbath. All right. Exodus chapter 12, verse 1. All right, the word Passover in the King James Version Bible is used 71 times. 71 times it's mentioned. And that's just one word. If you throw in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of the Victim, the word Passover in 2 words, you get several more times that it's actually spoken of, all right? Not just the 71 times. All right. Like I said, the first thing we want to do is learn to calculate Sabbath. Listen to what it says about this. Now, this is on to Exodus in chapter 12. We're getting ready. This is at the point where we've had 9 plagues already. All right. Anybody know any of them? Plagues of Egypt. Okay, well, locust one. Anybody else? Frogs, right. All right. After the frogs came, makes sense. Flies. That's right. You got a bunch of dead frogs. You got a bunch of flies coming next.
One of them was the infanticide.
The death of the firstborn. Yeah. That's one of them. That's one we're going to look at kind of tonight. All right. You also got the blood, the water.
How many is there?
There's 10 altogether. You have darkness. Everybody remember that one?
What?
Darkness.
Darkness?
Yeah. For 3 days, nobody in Egypt could see. It was so dark that they could feel it. Okay. Then they laid there for 3 days in the dark. Didn't see nobody, didn't do nothing. But the children of Israel have light in their camp. All right. Same thing when they're out in the Exodus. Same thing with the pillar of fire, the pillar of a cloud. The pillar of fire at one point, when it looked at Israel, kept them warm, kept them safe. But they took the Egyptian army and kept them in the dark and cold and stumbling around and afraid of everything. All right. Let's see. We're going to start this out. And Father, we ask that this open eyes and open ears, no matter where they are, in Jesus' name, amen. All right, chapter 12, verse 1, it reads, And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be unto you, the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Anybody know when this month starts? These people were an old set of sun watchers, right?
Was it at the very beginning of December, actually?
Nope.
How that worked? It had something to do with With the changing of the seasons, though, or something along
Spring
those
equinox.
lines. Whenever the day, yeah, the winter
The
equinox.
spring,
yeah.
no, spring equinox.
Spring equinox, okay.
The spring equinox is how you number the beginning of the months. All right. When it first comes out, this first month is called Abib. And let me get this. Doesn't spin on me anymore. Later it'll be changed to Nisan. All right. Whether it's called Abib or whether it's called Nisan, it begins on the spring equinox. You've heard me talk about this probably with the temple, right? Remember, on the first day of spring, you had that outer court and that inner court that we talked about in the millennium, right? Well, in both of the earthly temples, it's the same setup. At the first day of spring, they can open the front gates on the outer court, the gates on the inner court, then right there, open the inner sanctum, and on the first day of spring, when the sun comes up, it'll shine right on the Ark of the Covenant, or depending on which temple it was. And the first temple was Ark of the Covenant, and the second one was just empty spots because they didn't have it then. All right, so this is how they adjusted. All right, we know we're a quarter of a day off, right? But on the solar count, we got one extra. That's why we have a leap year on our calendar. All right, the way they adjusted for it, as it got off on that quarter day, as it got off, they just waited till the next day. And then as it came back, it'd be right back on it again, and then they would continue on. All right, so it was self-adjusting on that leap year. See, we have a leap year every 4 years to make up for that quarter. All right. That was how they adjusted for it. All right. This is called the month of Abib or Nisan. All right. Verse 3, speaking unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month, thou shalt take to them every man a lamb according to their house, of their fathers a lamb and a house. And if the house be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of their souls. Every man, according to his eating, shall make your count of the lamb. All right, now, all that means, there's a lamb that's picked out for every home, but you might want 2 portions. She might want 1. You might not like lamb. You might want pinto beans. I don't know. All right, but the point was that you worked it out, and there's a reason for it, because you don't need anything left when you're done. All right, listen to what it says. Verse 5, your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year, and you should take it out of the sheep or out of the goats. And we're talking about Passover here is what we're actually talking about. So a Passover sacrifice didn't have to just be a lamb, it could be a goat. All right? Now, if you remember back in Genesis, listen to what it says in Genesis chapter 4. Listen to it. In the process of time, this is after expulsion from the Garden of Eden. In the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of the flock and the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. You're going to have the good brothers fight over what was the difference between the 2 sacrifices, but listen to the words. Go back up to what the sacrifice. It needs to be a lamb without blemish. Often you'll hear about without spot or blemish. A male of the first fruit. All right. And it has to be out of the sheep or the goats. All those requirements you're going to find right here. Cain brought an offering. All right. He was supposed to bring a wave offering, which you put in a basket. You take your first fruits of the ground and you put it in it and you present it as an offering to the Lord. All right. Cain just brought an offering. What did he do with his first fruits? He brought what was left. He already ate his first fruits. He wanted them bad bears. All right? But Abel, he brought the firstlings of his flock, right? Flock in the Bible, when you're dealing with Genesis, means sheep and goats only. Right? Doesn't mean herds. Herds doesn't come in until when somebody in Cain's line, when the two of Cain's sons are the first ones that pitched tents and used cattle and herd cattle. Now, woo, bless you, yeah. All right? But you'll have good brothers fighting over why Cain and Abel why God had respect for Abel's and why he didn't have any for Cain's. Well, because Cain was a selfish SOB. All right? Instead of presenting an actual adequate sacrifice, he sent just what he got left. All right? But those both were the sheep and the goats were the flocks that these Passover comes out. The first set of domesticated animals that you come across in the Bible. All right. Verse 6, and ye shall keep it up until that's on the 10th day, right? They're going to, or did I skip something? Oh, yeah. And you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening, all of them at the same time. All right, so see how this goes. You got, where are we at? We're 14 days after spring, right? On the 10th day, they separated sheep. It seems like I skipped that. Yeah, I must be missing a verse or somewhere.
This holiday is called Yom Kippur, right?
Nope, this holiday that we're talking about is called Passover.
This is Passover.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So what they did was at the 10th day, after the first of spring, they took their perfect sacrifice and they separated it out of the flocks, put it in a home. Do up its hooves real good, clean it up real good, pet it real good, make sure it ate real good, right? Because it's counting down. And on the 14th day, that very animal that they separated and took such good care of, as the sun set, every house in Israel made the Passover sacrifice at the same time. All right, so this was a big deal with these people. All right, a big deal. And because they watched the sun all of its time off of the spring equinox. All right. Now look, since this time, we went through what? The Julian calendar? Or the Gregorian calendar? Yeah. No, we're the Gregorian calendar. The Julian calendar after the solar calendar. Then our Gregorian calendar that we use now. The first lunar calendar had a lot of problems with it, just like we encounter with leap years and uneven days in the month, things like that. All right, but here back in the beginning, that stuff was all timed off the first day of spring equinox. They're not the only ones. Pretty much every ancient culture figured out the precession of the equinoxes and how to calculate them. It became real important because if you knew when these time periods were, you know when.
Crop cycles.
Yeah, crop cycles. You know when animals begin to migrate. You know when fish begin to spawn. All these things time around these things. And here, this is their first month. So we're on the 14th day. On the 14th day at sundown, Passover sacrifice is slain. And by the way, the new day begins at sundown. So at sundown, the new day begins because Passover is the 15th day of the first month. All right, so on the 14th day when the sun goes down, begins the new day, slaughter the Passover lamb. All right, verse 7. And that's to take the blood of that very lamb that they had set up, all right, that very lamb that stands for the Messiah himself, the Lamb of God. All right. And they shall take the blood and strike it on the two side posts of the upper door of the post of the house, wherein they shall eat it. And they shall eat the flesh that night, roasted with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roasted with fire, the head with the legs, and with prudence thereof. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until morning. This is why the count was so important. Until morning. And that which remaineth of it until the morning, ye shall burn with fire. Okay, why? Okay, because this just wasn't dinner to these people. All right? This is an actant or a reenactment of something downstream that we enjoy. Very Passover sacrifice itself. Okay? Now, listen to what it says about this. You guys are all pretty familiar with Ephesians, like the armor of God. Every time I read this, I think of this. All right, listen to what it says. Anything that remains, you're supposed to burn it with fire. The reason why is because then it's holy. All right, it was holy. You didn't let this out for a dog to take off, for birds to eat. All right, so you took care of it the right way, and you just burned it if there was anything left, but you're supposed to have a good count, and there shouldn't be anything left. All right? Listen to what it says. Verse 11. And thus shall ye eat it, with your loins girded, just like in Ephesians. In Ephesians, you're girded with what? I think it was truth, wasn't it? Come on, somebody's an Ephesians student out there. All right. Listen to what it says about it. With your loins girded, that's an expression of military. That's a military expression, right? We talked about that. What does that mean? That means you take your robe that you're wearing, because everybody had to wear a skirt, all right? And you reach down, you grab both pieces, and you pull it up between your legs, and you stuff it in between your belt, and you pull it down tight, all right? So you have your legs free, because it's an expression that means to get ready for battle, all right? And so when you can hear in the Bible, that's just not some hearsay stuff. That means to do something, all right? That means prepare yourself for battle when you hear that expression. And that's what it means to gird yourself. All right? Your shoes on your feet, so ready to go, and your staff in your hand, ready for battle. All right, that's the way Passover is supposed to go down, because we have kind of the wrong perception of it. Okay, now as Christians, when it comes to the Passover feast, to us, what would it be? Would it be a holy feast? I'm talking about the actual eating of the lamb. All right? No. Paul addressed this before. Right? He was talking about an idol. But this is the same thing. As a Christian, it's not a religious meal. It's just good dinner. All right? Because, buddy, you ain't had anything good until you've had fire roasted lamb with bitter herbs. Buddy, let me tell you, that's good stuff. All right? And this is what it says. And you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and I will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. Sometimes we forget about that. Like he's punishing Egypt. Well, the point was so that the Egyptians would know that he was God. And if you go back and look at all those plagues, he's destroying Egyptian deities. All right? The locusts, that was one. All right? The Egyptians had a group of gods called locust chasers. Their job was to chase the locusts away. All right? So when they said, you got a plague of locusts coming, they said, no problem, we got locust chasers. All right, but the locusts came anyway, right? All right, the frogs, all right? Many deities for Egypt come out of the Nile. Alligators, frogs, cranes, things like these. You got all kinds of them. All right, so the frogs, that was a good one, getting rid of those. We got the firstborn in Egypt coming up. There's all of them tied directly to a certain deity or group of deities in Egypt. Why? Because he's what he said. Said, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am Yahweh. Verse 13. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the house where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. That's where the term Passover comes from. All right, we might break it down here in just a minute. And the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial. This word token up here, it's the same word that's used for Cain when he says he was marked. All right. One of the meanings is miracle. All right. So he's saying when you look at this, the blood on this door, remember it as a miracle. Think about the blood of Christ. All right. What the miracle associated with him was his resurrection from the dead. Okay. Defeating death. So that token, it's built into that, right? A memorial, always to remember. And you shall keep it a feast of the Lord throughout your generations. This means perpetually without ceasing. And you shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. All right, forever. Now, we are part of forever. All right? But yet, as Christians, we don't tend to keep the Passover, right? You understand what I'm saying? Yet you're going to find that this Passover feast is more directly related to Christianity than almost anything that you deal with in the Bible. All right? Within it, you find the symbols for the Messiah. You find the symbols for the resurrection with tokens. All right? Write it as a memorial. Just remember it forever. All right? Verse 15, 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away all leaven out of your house. And whosoever shall eat leavened bread for the first day until the seventh, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. God sounds pretty serious about that, right? More on the leaven here in just a minute. Now listen to this. And the first day, there shall be a holy convocation. They want a Passover, all right? And on the seventh day, there should be a holy convocation unto you. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat, that only may be done. All right. The first one of the Sabbaths, the 14th day when the sun goes down, is called biblically the high Sabbath. All right. It's how you time every Sabbath of the year based on that. Every 7 days after that. The first one starts it off. But then the next 7 days later is just the first Sabbath of the year. You follow me? That's why Passover has a holy convocation at the beginning and at the end of the 7 day period. All right? And then every 7 days after that. Now, let me ask you something. Well, here, we'll go just a little bit farther. Verse 17. And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for this selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. All right? So it's on the first Passover is when they're coming out of Egypt. That's what the celebration was about. All right? Therefore shall you observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. And again, it's repeated the second time within just a couple verses, right? So we know that means stand up, pay attention, focus, all right? Because you're getting it repeated. It's just a big blinking light is what it should be. All right. I brought my camel this time, but I'm still an idiot. There we go. All right. Verse 18, here's where it gets kind of interesting, all right? In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at even, that's sundown, yes, you shall eat unleavened bread until 1 and 20th day of that month at the even. So that's 7 days later from the 14th day. All right, so let's calculate this bad bear. You know how to calculate everything now. You don't know it yet, but you can calculate every feast, every festival, everything based on what you've just learned. All right, now pay attention, listen to what it says. Spring Equinox. This year, it's March 20th here. I also checked in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount. It's also March 20th. All right? Yeah. So that was March 20th. 14 days later, all right, when the sun goes down, anybody know what date that was? That was April 3rd. It was Wednesday. All right? Wednesday when the sun went down. You know what happened 2,024 years ago when the sun went down on that day? Jesus Christ himself was placed into the tomb as the sun went down on Passover. As he goes into that tomb, everybody in Jerusalem was making the Passover sacrifice for the last time under the old law. That happened Wednesday. Okay, Christ in the tomb, how long? 3 days, right. Wednesday, sun goes down, first day. Thursday, Friday. It's today. Christ's second day in the tomb. Anybody know what he's doing during this time? Where was he? Remember the parable in Luke? Where heaven's divided into two pieces? He was on the other side of the gulf testifying to those people who had never received the gospel. All the way back to Noah's day, right? All right. He's doing that right now. He was doing that right now, 2,024 years ago, with a couple of calendar discrepancies I'm aware of. Bear with me. Okay? So that's something to think about, right? Because that means Saturday, when you get up, that's his last day in the tomb. Tomorrow morning. By tomorrow night, sometime during the night, is the actual night that Christ himself resurrected. Okay? Wow. Starting to get uncomfortable, isn't it? Because now we're going to have to start doing some stuff. Because now we have to make a sandwich and everybody just take a little bite. All right? So that was all going on this week in Christianity, right? How many people even knew about it? Yeah, right. I remember sitting there just like you first time I ran into this. I was like, what is going on? How can we be making these kind of mistakes? What is it that we're doing? I'm going to answer those questions for you, all right? Let's finish up with this part. Listen to this, verse 20. And ye shall eat nothing leavened. In all your habitations ye shall eat unleavened bread. Then Moses called for the elders of Israel and said unto them, Draw out, take your lamb according to your families, and kill the Passover. Passover number 1. All right? Now, we've been talking about unleavened bread. The penalties for eating unleavened bread are pretty stiff, right? Cut off from your people, you don't do this, none of it even in your borders of your country. All right? Now, that's some pretty hard stuff. Now, Passover for unleavened bread for us as Christians doesn't hold the same meaning exactly. Because the point to this unleavened bread was that God told them, get up and go. Don't wait for the bread to rise. So they picked up their meeting trough and they loaded them up and they scooted out. All right? Now, if they would have, Israel's full of sin anyway, but if they hadn't listened, that would have been a sin, right? Now listen, to us it means a little bit something else, right? And the Gospels kind of draw that out. Well, we're going to go to the book of Matthew real quick. I want to go to 16, verse 5 is where we're going to pick it up. And then after we're done with these few verses, we're going to go backward one chapter here in Matthew, and I'll explain why. All right? This is what it says in Matthew. Now, this is concerning unleavened bread. Because to me, as a Christian partaking in Passover, a lot of that ritual stuff is done with, right? The meal, it's a good meal, but it's just a meal. I don't have to burn it with fire. Why? Because it was just dinner. I'll eat it for lunch tomorrow. All right? Now, in their time, it was different. Christ hadn't paid the price yet. All right? So then it was a holy meal, so they didn't mess around. Nothing scavenged it. They took care of it according to the law. The unleavened's the same. The leavened bread's the same thing. Listen to what it says in the New Testament about leaven. And when the disciples were come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. So here, we're right on bread right out the gate on this, right? Verse 6, then Jesus said unto them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. All right, now listen to what the disciples say. And I like this because it just shows you that even these brain guys can mess up every little bit and not quite get it sometimes. Because I know, I'll sit out there and be listening to somebody and have no idea what they're talking about. All right? And these little bad boys, they felt the same way. All right? Well, I think it's funny. Listen to what he says. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, is it because we have taken no bread? Which when Jesus perceived, he said unto them, O ye of little faith, why reason ye among yourselves because you brought no bread? Do you not understand, neither remember the 5 loaves and the 5,000, and how many baskets you two took up? All right? Remember, he fed them a lot of people just with nothing. That's when he goes on telling, neither the 7 loaves and the 4,000, and how many baskets you took up. That's what it says. Verse 11, now, how is it that you do not understand that I speak it not unto you concerning bread, but that you should beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. This is what it says in the next verse. Then understood they how that he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, just like at Passover. Now these boys understood. When you say unleavened bread, they understood what they were talking about, all right? So they know exactly that he's referring to the old law. It's not a mystery to them. They understand just like that. They just had the Passover, right? Listen to what it says, 12. Then understood, of unleavened bread. Listen to what it says. Then understood they how they bade them not beware of unleavened bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. It's not unleavened that you got to. What is leaven? Leaven, you take a little bit of the bread, you set it aside, so the next day, when you make another loaf, you got something to put in that gives it yeast. You mix it into the loaf, and within seconds it begins to expand and take over the whole loaf. All right? So if you have some kind of bad leavening, it don't just make 1 or 2 slices, it makes the whole loaf bad. All right? Like if you tried to make bread with tares, which a tare looks like a wheat. Tastes horrible though. All right? So he's telling them, you're not worried about the bread, it's doctrine that you're worried about. Now go back to chapter 15 of the same book. Listen to what it says. Then came to Jesus the scribes and the Pharisees, which were at Jerusalem. Same bunch of hoo-haws. All right? Sadducees, Pharisees, scribes. They're 3 of the same idiots working together. All right? 2. Why do thy disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? for they wash not their hands when they eat bread. So we're still talking about bread. We're still talking about that, but what are we talking about here? What's he accusing? These idiots from the temple come down and they're accusing them of breaking some kind of biblical law. That's what they're trying to say. What did he say, though? The traditions of the elders. It didn't say the traditions of God. No, it didn't say nothing about God's traditions. It said the elders, your daddy, your granddaddy. What are they doing? They're washing their hands before they eat. But what was it about? It ain't because it's like you out all day rolling concrete and you go to lunch to eat your salad and you're going to wash the hands. You wash your hands off so your salad doesn't taste like concrete. That's not what he's talking about. What he's talking about, these bad boys were all obsessed with ritual bathing. Washing your hands. You ever hear somebody say, throw salt over your shoulder? Same kind of things like that. When it came to baptism, these boys understood ritual bathing. All right? They've all probably been through it 7, 8 times by then. All right? But it's a little different in the New Testament. I'm talking about according to the old way. And these temple people, they were just obsessed with it. So when these guys are coming in and they're running around with the Messiah, they're not following the traditions that are established in the temple. Because it's scribes and Pharisees that you're talking about, right? So that's what he's calling them on. Hey, listen to what Christ says. Let me have a drink first. Verse 3. But he answered and said unto them, why do you also transgress the commandment of God with your traditions? Whoa. He's calling them out here. Listen. For God commanded, saying, honor thy father and thy mother. And he that curseth father and mother, let him die to death. And you'll find that in the law. All right? So what it says in 5. But ye say, whoever shall say to his father and mother is a gift, by whatsoever thou mightest be profited by me. Okay? Listen to what he's saying. They had their tradition. They had paying tithes, right? In this time, those scribes and Pharisees, with the money that they got, they were supposed to take care of the elderly, the orphan, people who needed it. All right? But what he's saying, this priest is saying to him, he's saying, look, you're telling people that you just give us the money and then we'll take care of your mother and father. And you get to where the mess up is? Instead of doing what the Bible says to honor your mother and father, these priests are teaching the people, no, that's our job to take care of your mama. You give us the money, we'll do it. All right. I hear stories every year about people with their own biological mother and father giving them dog food. You know, I can't imagine what this group of idiots would do if their responsibility was to elderly. And you can see where this is going? So Christ knows all this when he's telling them. All right, listen to what it says in 6. And honor not your father or his mother, he shall be free. Thus have you made the commandment of God of none effect by your traditions. All right? He's saying you honor your mother and father, but what you're doing, you take it all away by what you're doing. All right? Verse 7, ye hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy of you, that was Isaiah. That's the Greek version of Isaiah. These people draw nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain, in vain is empty or void, right? But in vain they do worship me, teaching for commandments the doctrines of men. See, he flat calls them out. When just washing your hands, that's just some doctrine of man that you made up. Alright? He's flat calling them out on it. This idea of paying me the money and I'll take care of your mama and daddy as they get old. That's far away from the Bible. And he's flat calling them out on it. Alright? But the point is that you get too many commandments of men, too many doctrines of men worked into your church. Alright? It's going to make it void. It's going to make your worship void in that house. Alright, so it is very important to try, and that's what Paul, I've said this before, Paul was concerned with many things, but the biggest thing that he was concerned with in the last days was doctrine in the last days. All of the apostles in the Gospels, their big warning about the last days is don't be deceived. Understand what's in this book and you won't be deceived in the last days. And that's what I'm about. That's all I'm about. All right? All right. Now that we've done this, let's build a sandwich and have dinner. All right, go over to chapter 12 of the book of Acts. All right. Now, we got this section to go and we're done, guys. You kind of pain. Well, maybe kind of just where it gets painful. Okay? Because this is where we all just have to face it. All right? And I told you I was going to build a sandwich. I had to take a bite. You guys are going to take a bite. It's a nasty sandwich. Tastes like crap. It's one bite. All right. We're going to look at Easter here. Passover, as you heard, 71 times. 71 times in the whole Bible. The word Easter appears one time in the book of Acts. One time. All right, let's do a little comparison, see what we see. Bearing in mind the doctrines of men. All right. Now, this is not given to change anybody's doctrine in any church outside of this spot. Okay? I didn't come to this place to be a disruptor with anybody. Okay? But by the same token, as somebody who teaches the Bible, I'm going to teach what it's about. All right? And if it offends you, I apologize never. All right? Because you got a problem with the Bible, not me. All right? You've seen how I do this. We get a Strong's Concordance. We dig words out. You find out what they mean. Helps you understand what it meant. Amen. Let's do it again. All right. Acts chapter 12, verse 1. And now about that time, Herod, the king, stretched forth his hand to vex certain of the church. This is the same Herod that built the second temple. Wasn't a nice guy. He was a building nut. All right, but he was a nut just the same. All right, and he's out grinding an axe against the early church. Listen to what it says. This guy, Herod, he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. All right. Did you say something, sweetie? Oh, no. And because he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. What's the days of unleavened bread? We've been talking about this, right? Passover. All right? Well, bear with me. Verse 4, and when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 coordinations of soldiers to keep him, intending that after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Peter, therefore, was kept in prison, but prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. All right, let's unpack all this. First of all, 4 coordinations. That's 16, if I got my numbers right, it's 4 groups of 4. That's 16 men, Roman soldiers, that they're sending for this one dude. Why? I mean, I'm sure they've heard rumors about the miracles around Jesus and all them, but to the Romans, that'd just be some superstitious garbage spread by them silly Jews down, about this guy that they already executed, and then they stole his body or something like that. All right. Now, Peter, now remember, they would have just dismissed the supernatural offhand. But something you remember about Peter. Remember when they went to see Jesus, when they went to grab him, remember Peter's the dude that took off the sword and cut this dude's ear off, one of the guards. Let me tell you something. Do you know how stinking good you got to be to cut somebody's ear off with a sword? All right? I mean, you got to be good. That demonstrates that Peter spent some time using the sword. Like any weapon, you're not going to get good with it until you put your time in using it. All right, that means, that's right, especially against, right. These were temple soldiers, but they were still trained, right. Now, right, so that, they remember that. It's a dude that cut off what's his name's ear. All right, and then the story went that Jesus healed it, which is what happened, but for them, that would just been superstitious nonsense. But boy, him taking that sword out and whacking his ear off without killing him, that got their attention, because they know.
Was this at the Mount of Olives?
Yeah, I believe it's on the Mount of Olives, right, where it happened. It would have to be, pretty much. Yeah, probably at Gethsemane, most likely. That much is a garden right there on the Mount Olives. All right. So nonetheless, they're hooking him up. All right. They're putting him in jail with 16 people, intending what? After the days of unleavened bread, feast of Passover. But here's translated Easter. All right. Any ideas on what this is about? Okay. Let's get our Strongs out. All right. In your Strong's Concordance, in the Greek index, you're going to find that this is word 3957. All right. Now it's Pascha. All right. But the thing I want you to know about this word is it's Chaldean in origin. Chaldean is Babylonian. It's one of the major dialects of the Babylonian Empire. It's one of, like, I think 5 that they had. All right, don't ask me to repeat them. I can only get a couple of them, probably. All right. But nonetheless, it's Babylonian. You know who else was Babylonian in this very chapter? High priest Caiaphas. That Babylonian, the word Caiaphas is Babylonian in origin. It's Chaldean as well. All right. What's interesting about this is it's the Babylonian word for Passover. All right. Now you can compare it to the Hebrew index to 6453, and 6453 is Pascha, all right, and it's used only technically with the Jewish Passover. Only. It's not used in any other way. All right. It comes from 6452, which is Pascha, which means to hop, to skip over, to spare. Okay? Now pass over. If you had the blood of the lamb on your door, you had to hop or skip over or pass your home. All right, and not take your firstborn. All right. That sets off some crazy in my mind. All right. Look at that. You have a Babylonian word that appears in a Greek text referring to a Hebrew feast that's established in Exodus chapter 12. That should set, man, when you start looking at that should make you go, what is going on with this? And I really don't have a good answer.
What did you say the language was that was spoken as Babylonian?
What's called? It's Chaldean. Yeah, Chaldean. It's one of the 5 dialects.
Syrian might be another one.
Maybe. Yeah, probably. There's a bunch of them. There's 5 of them. Some of them more dominant. Chaldean is the major one. That's what everybody's pretty much spoken Babylon. That's what Daniel would have been speaking whenever he was with Nebuchadnezzar, would have been Chaldean. All right. Well, good question, isn't it? But look, it causes some problems. All right. First of all, you got a reference to Babylon here. You know where the word Easter comes from? Ishtar, you got it. Yeah. You know where Ishtar makes its big appearance in the Bible? As the 13th gate of this ancient city of Babylon. You can go to England right now in the National Royal Museum, and you can see a recreation of the Ishtar Gate out of Babylon. They have some of it, and if you look right down here, it's 2 pieces about that big, and then they have this huge gate. So they got a couple pieces there, and you can look at the gate, but the recreation is archaeologically accurate. Okay. Now, what was Ishtar?
It was a fertility goddess.
Right.
Yeah.
Ishtar was an ancient fertility goddess. It has a lot of names, Nun and Isis. Any woman that has the power of war and love, you're going to find a reincarnation of Ishtar in one way or another. All right. Okay, so it's a fertility goddess. How does this work? Okay, like in rural communities, the way it worked was you had a group of people, probably 30, 40 people. People were in the thick of it together. Back in the times that they were alive, it was real life and death stuff. The people that they start their journey off are not the ones that they finish with it because they expected to lose a few along the way. Rough place to live. Now, this is going to be from an anthropological lens, not from a religious one. Be very clear about that when I say this. All right. How does this cult help somebody? Because, man, when it comes to religion, if it doesn't give you a benefit, doesn't help you in your day-to-day life or in your extended life or your group or your family, it doesn't give. It passes out, becomes some part of history. All right. So this is how Ishtar helped when it comes to the people. On the first day of spring, they were also sun watchers. They got together and they had this big party. It's called the Festival of Ishtar. Within it, they probably did a lot of hallucinations, did a lot of drinking, did a lot of feasting. And then all night long, no joke, all night long, they ran around having sex. All right? And it wasn't with anybody in particular. It didn't matter if you were married or not married. All right? It was a part of the celebration of fertility for these people. All right. Well, let's look at how this works then. What's the psychological effect? Okay, you come in the first day of spring equinox, you have this festival. At the same time, you're looking around and in your natural world, you're seeing everything's bumping uglies. I mean, you got rabbits, you got the sheep over here, you got goats over here, you got kids falling over here, and you have this big festival. Well, as time progresses, you see all these animals starting to bear off children. And humans are way at their 9 months. They're way at the very end of it. All right. So after this festival, they look at all this fertility build, and at the end of it, these women start having babies. All right. Here's what ties it together, though. So every man who was responsible for the security of that entire village could look at any one of those children in that entire village and go, that might be my child. All right. That one's my brother's. I know. I know that. Look at that guy. Look at his nose. That's my brother. All right? All right. And over time, that'll bind you together right there. Now, the next time your village is threatened, you'll go to bat for any of those kids. Every one of them could be yours. All right? And not only you, but every other swinger that's walking around up there with you. All right? They do the same thing. They go to bat for it. All right? And take care of business over it. All right? That's what gave them their edge in survival. All right, now, that's a rule setting. Let's go to Babylon with that whole setup, though. You're going to find out why it was one of the 13th gates. Politics get involved in religion no matter what, even in the old days. All right. Ishtar was the 13th gate because it was powerful. No other reason. A lot of money, a lot of power, made a lot of important decisions. All right. But one of the little kickers about Ishtar in Babylon was everybody that was a part of the cult had to show up at least 1 or 2 times, present yourself for temple prostitution. Male or female didn't matter. It was about sex. It wasn't about what sex you were. All right. Now, since everybody had to do it, that gives all these temple priestesses a lot of power. All right. Since they have to report, I mean, you might have the Fletcher's daughter over here. She's some sweet little 13-year-old virgin. All right. Some wacko might want to do some crazy stuff with her for sure. But what about you got the governor's daughter coming next week? What do you think that's worth? Who do you think was controlling who was doing with who? It was the priestess. Or the priest. It was a priestess and Ishtar. It was all girls. All right? So they're the ones that control it. So, you know, her virginity might be worth a few shillings. But, buddy, the governor, he screwed over my brother. All right? Took all of his land away from him. I'm going to get him, buddy. I'll pay more for her. All right? So you get to begin to see the sick that gets built into this. And when you put the political structure in it, right? All right. So that's why Ishtar was one of the 13 gates of Babylon, because it had power. All right? And it was real. It was money. It was life and death. All right? And that's why it was so important. So how did this happen then? We're here in the book of Acts. It's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. All right? Last Sunday, what did we do? Most of us, anyway. This is where everybody got to take a sandwich, take a bite. Because even people that are not religious participated last Sunday, right? First day, get up, get your kids dressed, little girls dressed, little boys dressed. First time you've been to church all year.
Like Easter egg hunting is what you're talking
We're getting there. We're getting there. All right. Then, packed it all up in our little baskets with our eggs, little chocolate bunnies, and we sent everybody off to church. All right. That's interesting. Yeah, that sounds a lot like something we were just talking about, doesn't it?
Talk about fertility, right?
Yeah. Right. Eggs. All right, because you try to figure out where this comes from. An egg-laying rabbit.
Right, because
I'm waiting. That's right. Fertility. That's right. All right, but eggs. Eggs, symbol of fertility from ancient times. It's a anthropological thing again. All right. So they took their kids, dressed them up, gave them their sacrifices of eggs and rabbits of fertility, sent them off to the temple. That's not even ignorance. Many of us did the same thing. Right? It's a hard one to swallow, isn't it? Yeah, I know me too. I sat there just like you going. I said some other time. Yeah. I'll cuss, yeah. That's the biggest thing up here. I'm afraid one of you guys going to hear me cuss. That's what I like about hearing them. You're going to fall over dead if I do. Yeah. You've seen the darker side of that stuff for sure. But that's just some food for thought. Anybody got any comments? Because this is a rough one, right. Sandwich tastes like crap, doesn't it? That's right. And we all did it. We've all done it. And there's no big deal. Okay? Just people tell me when I start talking about this, they say, well, should we not have our kids participate? It's like they do often with Halloween, right? I mean, that's just flat out just kind of weird. Right. And people ask me, should we not let our children do these things? And I always tell them, no, it's not. I said, don't keep them from it, right? But teach them the truth. Teach them what it is, all right? Teach them, okay, yeah, we're going to church and we're going to, hey, look at what this is really about, all right? Because I think you get more people converted by telling them actually the truth of what's going on than just making up some fable and going along with the program, all right? And we've had too many people who just went along with the program for too long, and that's what kind of put Christianity in this little bind we got here in the last days. I mean, yeah. Now, I would really like what anybody's got to say, please just let it rip, because...
What did you mean when you said something about timeline discrepancies earlier?
Oh, well, okay, the Julian calendar particularly, it dealt with the inconsistencies like of the quarter days in different ways. And but the Gregorian calendar that we use, it deals with them in a different way by uneven months. And because like the Julian had even months, but it got all messed up, and they've had to correct it, I think, twice when they used it, just because it got so screwed up. And so they revised it and called it the Gregorian calendar, but it was a little bit better. It handles the quarter days really, really well. And the rest of the time, it just splits the days up among 12 months. So that's why we got some 28 and some 31 and some 30, so like that. And that's how it deals with those inconsistencies. The solar calendar, those things were worked into the system itself to compensate automatically for it. That's what makes it far more accurate in the long term, particularly when it comes to calculating the Sabbath. Okay, so that brings me back to that then. Okay, so that means then on Wednesday nights, when the sun goes down, right, that's the Sabbath. That's when the Sabbath starts. It's on Thursdays until the sun goes down. That's when the actual biblical Sabbath is. That's why you get that big warning. The woe to those that make the Sabbath. They're going to fight about this. See how many churches break up over on what Sabbath day is? Saturday, Sunday, they're fighting the street over it. Right? Well, neither one of them got it right. They're fighting over stupid, fighting over duh. I'm not about breaking churches up. I'd rather unify them. But I think that you do a better job teaching the truth than you do than just, like I said. And if it causes division, that's just the way it is. I mean, like if I teach this tonight and people hear about it and I don't ever teach again, I did what I was supposed to do. Right? I'll be over there Wednesday night. That's why I do that over there. All right, nobody over there tell me you can't say that. I'm going to say what I want when I'm teaching.
Amen.
That's right. If you're not going to be that way, don't do it.
During the Passover, you sacrifice a sheep and it's a burnt offering. You cook it.
No, it's not a whole burnt offering. No.
Okay, so in Yom Kippur, are you familiar with Yom Kippur?
Yeah, it's Day of Atonement.
Right. So do they cook the sheep during Yom Kippur as well?
I'm not sure. They all had in the Old Testament. They all had sacrifices. The Book of Leviticus breaks all those sacrifices down for those.
Right. Are you aware that they run the other sheep or goat off a cliff?
No. There's a lot of traditions that are built into that.
Yeah.
Okay, like Passover. Okay. If I teach you the second half of this, because the second half of this, we go at some of the Passovers and look at some of the things that happened on Passovers that are very important. They built in. There's 3 feast weeks that are built into the calendar. Okay, you count by 7s. 14 days. You got 2 sets of 7. 7 means spiritual completeness. Spring equinox for 14 days. 2 sets of spiritual completeness. that starts off the feast years. The next feast that you get, Passover was 1 week. You number 7 total. 7 times 7 is 49. When the sun goes down on the 49th day, the 50th day begins, and it's the Feast of Pentecost. This is also referred to as the Feast of Weeks. Okay? And then you have a feast at the very end. It's the end gathering feast. It's the Feast of the Harvest, and it's timed off when corn comes in. All right? That's your Feast of your Harvest. All right? All of them are calculatable by the number 7. Right? Your Passovers, your feast days, your Sabbaths, all hinge on the number 7. All right? So there's how you find. That's where your Sabbath is. Your Sabbath begins the actual Sabbath now. Now your rest, that means rest is what Sabbath means. All right? And I follow the Jewish thing on it. That means don't work. You can labor for 6 days, take a day off. All right? The world ain't going to stop because you didn't go into work for 7 days a week. Besides, 3-4 weeks of that, you're about dead anyway. And everybody in here has probably worked those. We've all had to do it at one time or another. Flat kill you on the inside. Make you just sit there and cuss and be mad. Yeah, and then sometimes we're going to take it out on the old lady and the kids and stuff like that. But yeah, it can happen, huh, sweetheart?
Neighbor's dog.
Neighbor's dog, yeah. I mean, it can come out a lot of ways. All right, anybody, I'd really like to hear more because this makes me nervous giving this one up here. Because this is the first time I've ever given this lecture in an actual religious setting to people that go to different churches.
Don't be angry. Thumbs up.
Good deal.
No,
Hey.
no, I don't have any questions. I do have. If you're looking, like, I don't know how often you I don't know what your research process is, but if you ever want to hear somebody speak about the Old Testament and Jewish tradition, that's probably the foremost leading expert in the world, or one of them is Rabbi Tovar Singer.
I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, he's really he's pretty informative.
Yeah. My dad's Jewish. I get the law end of things like you ain't ever seen, buddy. Let me tell you. But I want to. Oh, that reminds. I want to tell you something. Passover, like it's got a lot of man stuff built into it, like the Bible. Next time I do the second part to this, if you guys get to hear it, we'll be looking at one of those. We're talking about to build up the Passover, and they're referring to it as Passover, but it's not. You remember when the disciples where they painted the Last Supper? It's the famous Last Supper, and they always call it the Passover. But it's not the Passover. It's the day before Passover, and it's called the Feast of the Firstborn. All right. Now, on the first Passover, God took the firstborn to Egypt. All right. On the Feast of the Firstborn, which occurs on the day before Passover, all right, everybody feasts except the firstborn, and they fast because of what's going on, because of what happened. But that feast is not biblical. Okay. That was added even in the time of Christ. Those things were already in existence. The disciples participated in them, but that wasn't the commandment to keep it. Because when he tells them to go prepare for the Passover, he's actually preparing for the Feast of the Firstborn, which gets you into the next day for Passover. So you get even in the New Testament era, you still had a lot of traditions like these guys were talking about, washing your hands, that were mingling in the church, and you'll find a lot of examples of where the disciples really fought real hard against those kind of things. And this is one of those. It's just like that. It's a hard one to look at sometimes head on, but when you do, you kind of makes a little bit of sense. But that's all I got. Anybody got any more questions? Nope. Well, I'm gonna turn this thing